So hello and welcome to another edition of the Osteopathic Lyceum podcast. Obviously, based on the shot, just the way it's going, my head is probably cut off. As far as I can tell, that's not the point. We have a complaint of left shoulder pain or left shoulder lack of range, or both.
It's discomfort in a short range.
In a short range. Is it end range?
What does that mean?
Close to the end as far as it goes.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So what we'll do is just go through a really quick rough assessment just to figure out if that is the shoulder that isn't moving as well as it could, and then we'll get into a treatment approach or a set of treatment approaches. So macro identifies micro, big movements are made of smaller components. So ideally what I'm looking for is this arm to be able to go down toward all the way to the table, and either the arm doesn't do it or he's resisting. It doesn't seem like he's resisting because I'm moving relatively slow, and then he makes a face, so there's that pinch, right? So the arm will go farther, but there is provocation there. There is resistance. So as far as the visual asymmetry, I'm not necessarily going to see it, right? And then there's winces, right? So when I say that you cannot feel the patient's feelings, I literally mean that. Now, that said, it doesn't mean that they won't give you proxies for discomfort, right? So there's no thing here where that same resistance, I don't feel that resistance here, it rolls right through. It doesn't go all the way down to the table. So there is some tension through the range in that shoulder, but it's not of particular concern. So again, I cannot feel his feelings, but he will give me proxy information. So coupled with the resistance to motion that I find, so there's visual where I see it in the range, and there's resistance to the actual motion. It's there, right? And then he makes a face. So when I say multisensory integration, or keep your eyes and your hands on the prize, or your hands and your eyes on the prize, whichever way sounds smoother, I've got that information. There is something he's trying to protect himself from. So I feel that resistance. I get proxies, visual proxies for protective mechanisms, for discomfort, whatever it may be, abrupt responses to movement, right? So now what I do is I check around the borders of the scapula. I'm not so concerned about the GH joint. I want to know what the heck is happening around the scapula. So here I go to the medial border of the scapula, and my hand is like this. What it ends up doing is anywhere on there that I feel resistance to the movement or high tone as I sink into the tissue, that's a point of curiosity or concern. And to be fair, it's pretty smooth, maybe a little tender there. Yeah, but I feel lack of smooth movement in response to what I'm doing. So I check there. I'm going to check the pecs, right? So I call this the anterior border. There's tension there. That's squishy enough. As we get closer to the tendon, obviously it gets firmer, but it's notable here, right? As I get closer to here, it feels stringier and less comfortable to you. Is that fair?
Yes.
Right? But it's not enough to make you jump. Right? Now I check what I call the lateral border of the scapula, or I just say a bunch of rotator cuff tissue. I end up doing this, push-pull perpendicular fiber direction, see if there's anything really funky. It's not that bad, maybe a little tender there, but you expect some tenderness. So based on what I found, I'm going to go through the medial or the lateral border, right? I'm holding the tissue still, you can't see it. My hand is like this, I push down, I hold the tissue still, so it's still tissue moving bone or still muscle moving bone. This will not likely change what we want it to change or what the patient wants it to change, but it's something, right? So it's just kind of rocking. It's rhythmic. I'm looking for no sense of protective response, which means no abrupt movements, right? I probably won't feel it change until such a point as I stop the movement and I retest it. Right? Now you didn't see that. It's still kind of stringy, but that feels different to you so far?
Yes.
Okay. And he said yes if it didn't get picked up on my mic. Now what I'm actually doing is I'm pushing up on the backside of all that tissue, holding the tissue still, moving the bone. Still tissue, moving bone. The reason I say still tissue is because my hand is still, and I'm generating movement with my hold that isn't going beyond where my hand happens to be. So sometimes it just takes a couple minutes and I can talk. If this was not being recorded, I'd probably be making bad jokes, or at least jokes that I found fun. Whether the patient agrees or not matters. But sometimes if it's a patient that you know quite well, they may tune into your sense of humor better than others. right? So we recheck with the same test, right? So that starts to feel like it's closer to the table. There's a little bit less resistance, right? That it's the pinch is there.
There's also less discomfort.
There's less discomfort. So that did more. There is still resistance in that range that was pinchy before.
Mm-hmm.
So now we go to the other area that I found that was high tone, that was notable. I go into the pectoral region, perpendicular fiber direction, relatively speaking. It's not going to be perfect. So it's going to be put the muscle on some tension, and then I'm going to actually soften it. So I'm going to roll the arm. So in my hand, it gets a little bit softer. So we're going direct, which means that we're going in the range of restricted motion, or the direction of restricted motion, without that tissue fighting back. I don't want that tissue to jump. I don't want that tissue to protect itself. There can be tension on it, but I don't want it to be high tension. That's why I turned or rolled the arm so that it softened up, so that the pectoral tissue in my hand softened up. And it's, again, still tissue, moving bone. As I start to do this, my hand will move a little bit, but it's a relative stillness to the tissue. So I'm kind of I'm pulling the tissue into the fixed point, on and off tension. That rhythmicity definitely seems to do something. It also challenges boundaries. If I simply stayed and held, you could say that it was inhibitory, so that I'm changing the length-tension relationship, the muscle spindle is giving different information, but you don't know that for sure. It's a nice story. It's a seemingly accurate story, but you're not sure. Right, we go back to the big test. Okay. Less resistance to the movement, no visible pain cues, no visible discomfort. You agree that it feels smoother, less discomfort?
It's drastically less.
Okay. So now what we do, especially in situations where patients have certain types of things going on, we go to the AC joint. So you can get a lot of bang for your buck out of the AC joint. So I hook behind the clavicle in the region of the acromion, and we just kind of see what this is doing. So you'll hold that still. You'll move the humerus in relation to the still clavicle, or really you're moving the scapula, which is moving the acromion in relation to the still clavicle. And this is often quite tender. This doesn't seem to be doing a ton for him as far as what I can palpate. Now you'll see my hand shaking because you have to be quite forceful so that the clavicle doesn't move back. There we go. And then sometimes when you go to retest, you got to give them a little bit of a break instead of keeping their arm in the same place. I'm going to go and check that. No resistance to the movement, no sign of discomfort. Yes, much smoother. So we go from a large test, compare both sides. We visually and auditorily identify restriction, or sorry, not auditorily, visually and palpatory, or visually and haptic. So I see the pain in his face, or I see what I think is pain in his face, or at least discomfort, or at least protective mechanism. I feel resistance, that's the haptic or the palpatory cue. I see the range, that it's short of full range, and then we go ahead and we get some change.